All right, everybody, we're going to get started. So this is the January Water Committee meeting. Our agenda has just one item on it, so we're not going to go through too many things. With us virtually is Raf Tellis. We have Todd Cristiano. He's been working on our water rate study for us, and he has a presentation for water rate structure today. We'll be considering a few policy questions, which he will go through in his presentation, and we'll talk about those once he's done with his presentation. And what the Water Committee will be asked to do is forward recommendations to the general government meeting. That will be February 5th, I believe. And that'll be a full council meeting where they'll take up these same questions with the Water Committee suggestions. So that's what we're going to be really doing today, is trying to answer a few policy questions as best as we can. So kind of with that, I'll turn it over to Todd and he can get started.
Great, thank you, Travis. Good afternoon, everyone. Appreciate the opportunity. Give me 1 second here while I get it all sorted here with the screen sharing and everything, and then we'll get going. So this is a pretty in-depth conversation today, and so please stop me with any questions you might have as we go along, because we're going to kind of get into the weeds a little bit here. So give me 1 second here. There we go. Just moving everything along. See everybody. Okay. All right. Well, like Travis mentioned, today is our cost of service and rate design discussion. As you may recall, we were speaking with you back in September regarding the financial plan and the 10-year financial plan and the revenue adjustments we were projecting for the 10-year study period based on recent updates to the master plan that JVA was completing. And if you recall, that was 7% increases, and I think that's what was adopted in January going forward. So today's agenda, walk through those basic things, then we're going to dive right into the cost service discussion and the proposed rates. And like every presentation, we always have that bill comparison and utility survey. We'll show you where the rates are falling. So there's three components to a rate study, and we've obviously talked about the first one. How much revenue do we need to meet our expenditures? The cost of service and rate design is what we're talking about today. Is everyone paying their fair share? Meaning, out of all the customer classes we have, is everyone paying their proportionate share of cost based on their demands and characteristics they place on the system? And
hey Todd, can I stop you for a second?
Sure.
I just want to make sure you're going to be sharing the presentation. It's just a blank Zoom screen right now.
Why is it saying that's odd? I'm sorry. Why is it doing? Because I've got it. Mine says, okay, let me stop sharing here. Yeah, it said I was on the share screen there. So let me see what's going on there. I apologize for that.
Oh, that's okay. Just before we got too far into it, make sure we get that one figured out.
Yeah, let me just try to do this screen over here, and okay.
Excuse me. When you
Yes.
talk about equal rate structure, you do mean by category as far as commercial, residential, or whatever, and not money-wise, what a family makes or whatever.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Can you see that screen there?
No.
Screen 3. Share.
Hold
Can you see that now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, now it's gone. Okay, let me blow this up again. Geez, this is kind of frustrating here. Try this. Yes, that's a good question. I think there we go.
Perfect.
How about that?
Yep.
All right.
Thank you.
So yes, we're looking at each customer class, or the revenue we are recovering from each customer class is based on the cost to provide service to them. The rate design is a little different. It's how we're getting that revenue from each customer, service charge versus volume rate. So we're going to walk through that process here in just a second, give you a little more detail. We can answer some more questions on that. So the financial plan recap, like I had mentioned, we have the equal annual adjustments of 7% in 25 through 34. This we're recommending and proposing. We had some SRF funding, main replacement, and some of the galvanized service line replacement to help with that. The goal was to fund approximately $51.5 million in capital improvements over the study period. And again, that's based on the JVA master plan. And obviously, we need to maintain our debt service coverage and target reserve requirements set by the bond covenants and what the city's financial policies are. Finally, there was one other topic we talked about briefly in that meeting back in September, and that was tap fees. We did an in-depth analysis and looked at the city's tap fees. Those are the fees that are assessed for new development within the city. It's assessed by meter size. And we did an in-depth analysis, and we found that there was no change required at the time based on looking at the existing assets, the value of those assets, and all the other information that goes into tap fees. We recommend maintaining your tap fees at the current level. So no change to that. And the tap fee revenue you get is fairly nominal each year. So by leaving with the same level is not going to, would not shift the percentage increase over the couple of years by anything. It's kind of immaterial. So let's jump into the cost of service. Again, the cost of service is a couple of things. It determines the amount of revenue to be recovered from each customer class. So what's the amount of revenue we need to get from each one of the customer classes we have? And part of that is based on the number of customers within each class, the size of their meters, which kind of gets to the size or amount of volume they use, and the demands they place on the system. And when we talk about demands on the system, we're not just talking about average day demands, but we know that different customer classes and customers within that class all place different demands on the system. So it's about the amount of usage over the course of a year, but also the rate of usage, those peak times. So if you think about an irrigation meter and you look at it, the profile of an irrigation customer over the period of a year, there's a lot more usage, a higher rate of usage in the summertime, especially when they aren't irrigating, than in the wintertime. There's just no water usage at all. So we consider the total volume of water use, but also the rate of the use. Similar to the electric industry, when you talk about peak demands and kilowatt demands and kilowatt charges, in a similar sense as electric. We also look at the number of customers in a class, and we look at the number of meters by meter size. So most customers in your residential class are 3/4 inch, but you get to the commercial class and some others, there's a whole distribution of customers at various different meter sizes, and that's important for determining cost of service. And we know that the costs are going to vary by customer class, and that's because each customer class has kind of a different, in aggregate, has a different demand profile, and that different demand profile commands a different cost recovery from each one of those classes. The steps to go through the cost of service and get to the cost required from each class is we determine the revenue requirement. It's kind of a fancy way of saying we look at the year in which revenues or rates will be adopted. In this term, we looked at fiscal year 25, and we consider the budgeted expenses, your capital improvements, your debt service you're paying for the year, all those expenditures needed to maintain and operate the system on an annual basis. We look at those costs, so that's called the revenue requirement or the revenue required from rates. And we look at all the different costs. So if you think about your budget, the budget is set up salaries and wages, materials and supplies, and you do have categories of distribution and treatment. And what we like to do with our analysis is we want to assign all of those expenditures, both operating, debt, and capital. We want to assign them to different functions within the system. So we want to look at certain costs. So for example, chemical costs. Those are most related to treatment-related cost. Electricity costs. They might be most related to some treatment, but also pumping costs. So if we can get these costs assigned in these different functional or facility buckets, it helps us determine the cost allocation to customer classes. So another example might be IT and billing, and the billing staff's time. That would go in what we have as one of the facility buckets we have is utility billing or customer related costs. And if we can take your revenue requirement and break it down and put it in each one of those buckets, we can then have a better relationship to determine how those costs are going to be distributed to customer classes. And that's called functionalization and allocation. The allocation component of this is where we know that all the facilities in your system are all operate and are designed in a certain way. So for example, a water treatment plant is designed to meet maximum day demands. We know that storage is designed to meet peak hour and fire flow demands. And we know there's a cost associated with meeting average day, and peak hour demands. So if we can take those functionalized costs that are in the various buckets of water treatment, distribution, pumping, storage, so on and so forth, and assign the costs based on the costs of providing average day demand, and peak hour demand, or even with the IT and billing example, billing or customer costs, we can use that allocated cost and assign it to the various customer classes, because every customer class has an average day demand and a peak day demand, peak hour demand. They have customers. So we have the numerator that's been allocated to those areas. We have a denominator with each customer class's demands of average day, and peak hour. And we can distribute those costs proportionally based on each customer's class, proportionate share of demands on the system, average day and peak day. So that's what the distribution of cost to customer classes. That's how we arrive at the cost of service. Now, I realize I went through that very quickly. This slide here and the previous slide are usually about a 3-day course, and I went through that very quickly. But the key thing is that the process we go through is about proportionality. It's proportioning out the cost based on how those customer classes place demands on the system. That's kind of the key thing that we need to take away from the cost of service analysis. So we had a couple of areas of focus with this study, and a lot of interesting discussions with Travis on how do we determine these costs and things, and it was definitely an interesting exercise. One of them was looking at the zone or pumping surcharge analysis. You have 5 pumping zones and 5 pumping surcharges right now. That had not been looked at for some time, so we did a cost of service analysis on that. We wanted to make sure we have equitable allocation of golf course and city park cost. So as part of our cost of service, we broke out the golf course as a customer class and the city parks as a customer class, municipal as a customer class. And those both have different demand characteristics. So as you can imagine, they have different cost and unit cost associated with that. Fire protection rates. Now this is private fire protection rates for those commercial customers. They have a private fire line on their property. And we designed private fire protection rates for those customers, and that's in addition to their regular, monthly service charge and volume charge. The private fire protection rates really recognize the cost of having capacity available at any time, and also just the billing and all that sort of thing associated with those private fire lines. So it's kind of a capacity or a readiness to serve charge. You may have heard of that in the past. It's a readiness to serve that, should there be a fire, the fire department can hook directly up to that and command instant capacity and demand, and that's kind of what that fee is paying for, and that's a monthly charge as well. And one of the things was looking at combining the group user rate class and municipal class together. We had them separated just to show here in our cost of service, but that was also another discussion topic. The other one, should cost of service rates be adopted for all classes? And I'll get into that in a little bit, so just hold your thoughts on that. And if we do adopt the cost service classes, some of the rates might decrease from what you've got today. And we've got an alternative cost service to show you about that as well. For example, the monthly service charges are projected to go down under our cost of service analysis. And the question is, well, should you retain the existing service charges, or should we reduce the service charge to kind of match the cost service analysis? And there's a couple of things there from a cost service perspective. Obviously, if you do reduce those monthly service charges, you're following cost of service. But then there's also that policy decision of, well, if we reduce something, can we raise it back up, and is it confusing to customers, among other things. So, we wanted to throw these out here for consideration and get some feedback for when we do finalize this. The other one is, so here's like I said, here's the example here. We have two cost service options for you that the cost service, we retain the greater of existing or cost of service rates. So if a rate comes in a particular class or meter size and it's lower, we keep that, or the cost of service. The adjusted cost of service was one that I proposed to Travis, was that when you have rates that decrease, a volume rate that decreases from your existing based on the cost service analysis, that trying to get that raised back up in the future might be difficult. So it goes down, dips down, and comes back up. So I had proposed to him that some communities say, well, that's great. The cost service is recommending $1 for our dollar per 1,000 gallons for our commercial class. Right now it's $2 per 1,000 gallons. Do we want to reduce it down to $1, or do we want to maintain it at $2 per 1,000 gallons, take that additional revenue that we would get as a result of that and help bring down some of the other increases from the other classes? A wholehearted policy discussion here, because we are getting away from cost of service there, but then it's more of optics and what's best for your customers and the community. And should private fire line fire protection line rates be adopted? This is a new charge that the city does not currently have. You have about 85 commercial accounts that do have these, and the cost recovery you get from that is $38,000, which means we're not getting an additional $38,000 on top of the 7%. It simply means that of that 7% increase, $35,000 has been allocated to the private fire line customers, or stated another way, that the other customer classes are in total are paying $38,000 less than their total cost, because we're shifting that cost to the fire line. And should the cost service pumping charges, zone charges, be adopted? They were last changed over 5 years ago. We're not quite sure the basis for the changes, but the cost service does realign the costs associated with providing service to those pumping zones to those customers. Now, the challenge is that the cost of service rates are much higher than the existing rates. You can see that last bullet there. We're going from $154,000 recovery, approximately $154,000, to about $417,000. So an increase there. But if we look at that over 5 years, we would need to parse out those increases. I don't know quite exactly what that percentage would be, but it's been at least 5 years since they've been changed. So it's not, wasn't surprised to see an increase. Whether this is a larger than anticipated increase, I don't know, but I was not surprised to see an increase. Other policy considerations: should the group user class be combined with the municipal class? Travis and I talked about that quite a bit, looking at the demand patterns. There's not a lot of customers in a group user class, and as a result, you kind of have a large diversity of demand. And so if you have one large customer and one smaller customer, kind of throw things out of balance a little bit. But when we do the analysis, it shows there's a decrease in their costs, and the current rate is similar with the proposed municipal rate, $4.68 per 1,000 gallons. So if we combine the class, it would reduce the rates slightly. So those are some of the policy considerations. So as we were putting this together, a lot of moving parts. And when you pull one lever on one thing, it kind of moves the lever on something else. So that was certainly a challenge as we went through this. So let's look at the cost of service to the revenue 2025 rates. So the column you see here is the cost to provide service to each customer class based on that analysis I just talked about, the allocation, the buckets, and all that sort of thing. And the total revenue we're getting is $9.3 million. That is the amount of revenue that we are projecting overall with the 7% increase for 2025. So we are not recovering any more, any less. Our rates, the costs here are designed to be recovered at $9.3 million. You can see how it's distributed here. Obviously, residential is your biggest class, followed by commercial at $2.3 million, so on and so forth. Now, what we want to do is compare that to the revenue at your 2025 rates, which is simply 7% on top of your 2024 rates across the board for every customer class. And if you apply 7% to that, you're going to get $9.3 million recovery. So we're getting the same recovery overall, but you can see how the costs have shifted, and that's a result of the cost of service analysis. The last cost service analysis was done in 2018, I believe. So there's been some changes, and we were looking at classes a little bit differently than we were before. So we look at the delta here, the dollar change and percentage change. You can see a lot of changes here. And the pumping you see is 170.4%. I know percentages can be misleading sometimes, but you can see on the dollar change, we have commercial going down, commercial multi-unit going down. Travis and I looked into, well, why is commercial multi-unit going down so much? Well, in the previous study, there was a recommendation to reduce the rate through a phased period. I believe that it was phased for a little bit, but then it stopped and it continued to increase with the overall financial plan increases. So we never got down to that lower rate that was proposed in the last cost of service. So it's a holdover from the last cost of service. The other reason these other ones went up can be a myriad of things, but my suspicion is, based on comparing it back, is really the demand patterns of these customers have changed. Now, in the previous study, I believe they were really relying on quarterly billing data. So it was a little more difficult to kind of get down to the, a lot of granularity with looking at the rate of demand for peak month and that sort of thing, which is required for the analysis. That could be part of what is causing the change here, because now we have monthly billing data. The city bills monthly. You can see private fire protection at the bottom here. There was no rate for them in the past. That's why it says N/A. So they're a new class there for about $38,000. But our cost service analysis, at the end of the day, we were covering the same amount of money than your existing rates, 2025 rates. It's just distributed differently in a proportional manner based on how the cost service analysis was analyzed. So let's look at the second alternative, which this gets a little more complex. We have the 2025 adjusted cost of service. You'll notice that it says 9.355 million. It's a little different than the 9.317. I'll explain what's going on there. Here's our revenue at existing rates again. This adjusted cost of service looked at the customer classes. So I'm going to jump back to the previous slide. So keep your eyes on the commercial row there, the 2.361250 for commercial under the cost of service, and the revenue at existing rates of the 2.562. There's a decrease there. When we looked at option 2, which is like, hey, we don't want any customer class cost to decrease. So commercial multi-unit, we want to stay, we want to recover $2.562 million. Let's see my final $2.562 million. We don't want that cost to go down because the cost of service now is showing 2.3. So what that does is that gives us $201,000 of revenue that we can redistribute to those customer classes that are going up to help reduce their overall cost a little bit, reduce the impact. So reduce the municipal a little bit to 57%. And so that's what we're doing. But the amount of the money that we can redistribute, the 201, 474, and 5351, is greater than the amount we can offset. So as a result, we end up with a little extra revenue recovery. So yes, this one's a little more complicated because we're kind of throwing a policy option in here as well. But just to show you is that essentially we're able to get everyone else's rates down, and we're leaving the fire protection rates the same because they're new, and if we applied the credit to them, it'd be zero. There'd be no no charge for them in their new class. So this is more of an exercise of a comparison of an option of, hey, we don't want to reduce somebody's rates. We want to keep that customer class the same. It was an option that Travis and I had talked about, and we decided to show it here just as a benchmark or another way to look at the cost of service. So I'll leave it at that. It's fairly complex compared to the regular cost of service, I understand. But so that was our option. Let's take a look at the rate design here. We have two components. We have the service charge and the volume charge, and that's the same for all your customer classes. Everybody gets charged a service charge by meter size, regardless of the class. And these kind of recover in our cost analysis. What we were trying to recover here is meter maintenance and meter billing, and the cost of the field service crew responding to customer calls and that sort of thing. We also need to recover customer billing. There's obviously a cost associated with sending out a bill. You have IT resources. You have FTEs associated with that as well. But we also wanted to do something else here because those two components of the service charge aren't a significant amount. I mean, the amount it costs to send a bill per customer is about $2, $3, something like that. And the meter maintenance and meter reading is not a significant charge either. But we wanted to also include was a capital component that's kind of as part of your fixed charge. We're getting sufficient funds for capital repair and replacement or upgrades, whatever you want to call it, capital. And so what we've done here is we've incorporated about a year's worth of depreciation expense in here. Now, I know depreciation expense is a non-cash item. We're simply using this as a proxy for, we realize that your assets lose value each year in terms of depreciation. And so we're kind of mimicking that as well. But also, you're getting about 29% of your fixed charge revenue from your total water sales. We wanted to kind of maintain that as well. So that's the service charge, those three components. The volume related costs include everything else. The cost to collect, treat, distribute water to customers, the transmission and distribution system to move the water, storage and pumping facilities, public fire protection costs. And I want to stress here that cost of service is not a fixed variable charge analysis, because if it was, 80% of our cost would be in the fixed charge and 20% would be in the volume charge. You'd have a 30 cents per 1,000 gallons volume charge and a very high fixed charge. What we're trying to do here is, instead of fixed and variable, we break it out between volume component and customer related. And the volume cost are the costs associated with moving the water and the costs associated with meeting the demands of the customer. The customer costs, which are the fixed costs, are those costs associated with customer specific issues, things that costs that are incurred as a result of a customer activity. So that's kind of the difference we've got here between fixed and variable and volume and customer. Now, when we talk about our rate design, we do have fixed and variable rates, which are based off of the cost of service. So some confusing nomenclature there, but just to keep that in perspective of how we're looking at it when we're allocating costs in our cost of service. So given that, here is the proposed rate schedule for service charges. You can see that we're currently charging the 2025 rates, which just got adopted, are 1826 for a 3/4 inch meter and 5/8 inch meter, and it scales up. When you look at the cost of service, you can see that the 1.5 inch or even the 1 inch meter is slightly lower than the existing 2848 versus 2458. And this gets back to, well, do we want to reduce that charge or do we want to keep the 2848? So the adjusted cost of service, and all that analysis we went through before, basically comes down to this. We're keeping the greater of the cost of service or existing rate. So in this sense, hey, the charge is 2458. We want to keep the greater of the two. And so we've designed our service charges here by meter size, the greater of existing or cost of service. And again, this was a policy-related exercise that we wanted to take a look at. Okay, The volumetric rates, very similar. So you look at the 2025 rates, $2.17, and so on and so forth. The cost service, we are increasing for residential. If you remember back to that slide a few slides ago, there was a slight increase for residential customers. But under the adjusted cost service, we were able to buy down their additional cost to provide service, so it goes down to $2.27. Plus, we're keeping the greater of existing or the cost service rates too, so that plays a part in it as well. So, but you can see here the cost service on commercial actually goes down from 352 to 320. In the alternative here, let's keep the greater of existing or cost service. So we've done that here. You can see that municipal and golf course are the same price here, but under cost service, they're different. And under the alternative here, it's actually a little bit higher under the alternative 277 and 276. This might just be a rounding item here. And group user, we're keeping the lower of the two here. The pumping rates, 2025 are the existing rates, which you've got now. The cost service, the proposed rates, that large percentage increase we saw, you can see here $1.30 versus 82 cents, $1.39 versus $1.16, so on and so forth. The adjusted cost service, let's take the here we're taking the existing or the adjusted here, and 82 cents, $1.16, $1.79, and 57 cents. So what we are doing here is looking at the lower of the rates here for the pumping. Here are the pump zones here for the 5 different pumping zones we have. And Travis, I don't know if you want to add anything here about the pump zones that are we've designed the rates for or not.
No, I just thought it'd be a good visual to show what we're talking about when we're talking about pump zones. You have the 3 major ones in Lower, Mid, and Upper Dawson, North 9th, and then 4 Mile Ranch are the 5 pumping zones. Everything else is gravity fed. And then an important note, I think, is those pump charges are added on to the volumetric rates. So when you see those numbers, that's added on to their existing rates. So they're paying more because we're using power and capital and people to go check on that to serve them water. So just making that clear.
Here are the private fire line charges we've got. Again, these are new. They don't have an existing one, so these are the proposed. There's no alternative 1 or 2 here.
And again, that's monthly charge.
Yes, monthly charge. So this all boils down to, well, how does this affect a customer's bill? We've done all this technical analysis. So how is this going to affect your customers, and is there going to be a huge impact? So here we go. We have 3,000 gallons, 7,000 gallons, and 10,000 gallons for a residential customer, 3/4 inch. And you can see for 3,000 gallons, some slight differences there between the cost of service and the adjusted cost of service option 2. And again, same thing for 7,000 gallons. And with 10,000 gallons, you can see there's a bit more of a difference there, just about $1 or so. The percentage change in the residential cost service, the original cost service, was only was under 10%. It was a few percentage points. So the option of buying down the cost there didn't do a lot. You can see here. So, but you can see there's definitely a difference between the existing charge of 2025 and the cost of service under those 3 different levels here. So 7,000 and 10,000, those are kind of the averages you see in the system, and 3,000 is more of the wintertime usage. So kind of just a good swath of typical usage there. Let's take a look at how you compare to communities around the area. We spent some time coming up with the communities we like to compare with that have similar characteristics as the city. We just didn't pick cities because they had higher rates than the city of Canyon City. We wanted to pick some representative communities that are around the area and are of similar makeup and characteristics. And you can see that the cost of service for single family residential bumps you up to the highest point in the graph. and the adjusted cost service is just one thing below that. Now, the key thing is we don't know what other communities have done for increases. We do have some communities recognize adjustments in here for the 2025, but there are maybe one or two that haven't adjusted them. So it's sometimes comparing apples to oranges there, but we were able to update a few of those with their 2025 rates. So in closing, we designed the financial plan, 7% overall increase. We did our cost of service analysis, and what we did is we broke up your expenditures for 2025, did a cost allocation analysis to say, well, what kind of cost are these in terms of providing average day, peak day service, and how do they equate to each customer class such that we are recovering their proportionate share of the cost to provide service. Once we got to that point, we were able to break out and say, well, how much of those customer costs, what does that make the service charge look like? And the remainder goes to the volume charge by customer class. We put those costs through each one of the customer classes volumetric rate structure to come up with those rates, and end up here with the typical bills, a slight changes there between existing and cost of service, and this survey here. So a fairly complex topic. I went fairly quickly. There's a lot more detail here, but I wanted to give you the overview of how we got from point A to point D, because there's a lot of steps there. So I'll be quiet and take some questions.
So if you guys have any just general questions, we can go through those. I thought the best way to do it was just to go back through policy questions and kind of start there so we're not all over the map. First policy question being, should overall 2025 cost of services be adopted? Or going further than that, should the 2025 adjusted cost of service be adopted? So Todd, I think the best slide to kind of rest on this, it would be slide 18 that shows the volumetric water rates. Of course, we can look at whatever we would like, but I think this one kind of best displays what we're really talking about here when we're talking about charging people the water. Does anybody have any questions first on the type of users that we're showing here? Usually the question that I get is group users. Those are consecutive systems, so we're talking Brookside and Orchard Park. Those are the two group users, customers that we have. They're consecutive system. We sell water bulk to them. They have their own customers, they do their own billing. We just wholesale sell water to them. So just wanted to clarify that.
Travis?
Yes, sir.
Commercial, multi-unit, all usage.
Yeah, so
Is that all commercial units?
no, so when we're talking about commercial multi-units, that's your duplex and up. So
Okay.
apartment buildings is a multi. Anything more than a single family when it's together is considered a multi. Commercial would be everything else that's non-residential. Yeah. So when we start talking about our cost of service, there's really a couple of group users that really are slated to take big increases. Residential is slated to take a slight increase, but there's two bigger ones. There's the golf course and there's municipal. I wanted to bring up municipal as just to the fact that that's a pretty large increase for budgets to absorb. I'm not sure if we have any kind of number that we actually put in for increased water billing from general fund to water fund. I know there were some put in there, but I don't know if you know, we didn't have these numbers when we were talking about budget back in July, August, that sort of thing. So I think it was, you know, we knew it was probably going to go up, but to what degree? And we also have the golf course. So golf course would be, I think it was a 70-some% rise in rates. So I think that's an important thing to talk about when we're talking about cost of service. I actually invited Jonathan Sims from the Four Mile Golf Course. And if you want to say a few words, I think that would be appropriate to hear from the golf course in light of, you know, this showing quite a large rise in golf course rates. So I thought their perspective would be important. So if you want to, yeah.
Thank you. Come here.
Yep. Okay.
Hi, oh, you can hear me, it sounds like. Hi, thank you for this opportunity. My name is Jonathan Sims. I am the owner's representative for the new owners of 4 Mile Ranch. As you likely know, 4 Mile Ranch was annexed and planned for development over 30 years ago. There have been a number of owners over these 30-plus years, and development has been frustratingly slow. The new ownership group closed on the property in October 2023, about 16 months ago. The new ownership has no affiliation with any previous owners of 4 Mile Ranch. We understand there were arrangements and agreements relative to water, and there has been some frustration with water rates and water usage at the golf course. The new owners understand this and have hit the ground running relative to water use. We are working through an amendment to the plan development overall, and a big part of the amendment is a significant reduction in new water infrastructure. We are moving future homes and neighborhoods further south within the planning development, down off of the northern hills and closer to the existing water infrastructure at the south near County Road 123. We are reducing the future water infrastructure footprint and pushing less water uphill. We have spent the last 15 months doing all that we can to reduce water use at the golf course. Good news, we have reduced water use for the golf course irrigation from 2023 to 2024 by approximately 28% in our first year. We've studied extensively each golf hole in the practice areas, specifically searching for fairway areas we could reducing irrigated turf grass across the golf course by nearly 5%. We can't reduce much further without adversely impacting pace of play and the user experience. We have invested in pump equipment upgrades. We have reinforced and improved the fertilizer and nutrient program to reduce water burden. We are updating the irrigation pond to reduce water loss and to become more water efficient. We have been exploring many potential opportunities to bring raw, renewable water to the golf course. We are studying water rights and logistics to bring water from 4 Mile Creek, adjacent ditches, and well water. We also have employed the same water modeler the city has used to build virtually the existing and future water distribution systems to understand and engineer water usage efficiencies. We are working with Travis and the city to give land to the city for city pumps and power redundancy. In the first year, the new ownership has even brought the golf course operations from financially in the red to profitable in the black, first year. 4 Mile Ranch's new ownership is dedicated and motivated. They believe in Cannon City and need more time for improvements. We understand there is a potential rate increase for 4 Mile Ranch at nearly 75% increase. We ask you humbly, please allow 4 Mile Ranch to continue with the current water rates. We need more time to shore up design, infrastructure, and funding. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
With the proposed increased rate for you folks, what does that hold for the future of the golf course?
It's concerning. It's grim. The golf course has been bootstraps for many, many years for a number of reasons. We've been able to come in and make some efficiencies, work with staff, and get and support the marketing of the golf course to get it from considerably in the red to into the black. We've been able to do this in the first year. We're very excited about the future. The golf course is challenged not having a clubhouse and having the event opportunities. So we're excited for the future and being able to build those amenities and provide those amenities and for the future of the golf course. But right now it has been bootstrapped, so we've been able to like I said, get it into the black, but this kind of increase is, it makes the ownership group very concerned about the future viability of the golf course, because it's a lot of money, and the golf course does not make a lot of money.
I have two questions. When you say you saved 28% over the last year, is that weather adjusted?
I don't know, it's not weather adjusted.
Okay.
I've been trying to, and the golf course staff as well, trying to find where we can pinpoint water, rainwater from year to year. We're looking at installing water stations at the golf course to help us dial in exactly how much rainwater has fallen and where and when, and so we can further dial in, the water irrigation application. But it is not weather adjusted. I'm trying to find that information to confirm.
Okay. My second question is, there's quite a difference between the cost to serve the golf course and the rate that you're being charged. Someone else is subsidizing you, in essence. Is that an issue that concerns you at all from a community standpoint?
100%. The golf course, the entire development is part of the city. It is part of the community. It's throughout the city's comprehensive plan to make sure 4 Mile Ranch is seen through in providing new and necessary housing, and very intentionally for older populations. The golf course in 4 Mile Ranch is as successful as the community, and the community is in this area as successful as the golf course in 4 Mile Ranch. So it's one and the same, and we want to be good stewards, and we want to pay the fair share of rates. We just need more time to get in and try to find raw water opportunities, continue to work on if we can get a well out there to help offset the treated water usage. So it is a significant concern. We want to be good stewards. That's what we're trying to demonstrate in our first year, is we're doing everything we can to reduce water use and to look for opportunities to offset treated water. Treated water being used to put on a golf course is not common and not ideal, right? So we're really doing everything we can to offset that and eliminate that if we can.
I got a question to add on to that. Go on to that a little bit further. You talked about the new water coming in, and I've heard about you guys working with 4 Mile or trying to find some water rights and stuff. Where does that stand right now? How far are you into that, and what are you doing exactly? Because that is ideal rather than treated water on that.
Yes, thank you. So we have a number of different options that we're exploring. We've been talking to Travis and others at the city to understand what water might be available in adjacent ditches. Adjacent landowners between us and 4 Mile Creek. It's one thing it's a significant hurdle to work your way through water rights such that you can capture water. If you get water from a ditch, you can't necessarily hold it for more than 72 hours without special permitting. Even if you can access the water, there's still the logistics of transversing that water from the creek or from a ditch across land and uphill to a golf course. We're talking to Park Center Water, about opportunities there, adjacent landowners that have water rights, trying to find some win-win opportunities, talking to the city about potential opportunities there. We have probably, I think, 4 or 5 potential options that we're exploring, but the water rights is one significant logistical challenge, and then just physically transporting the water across land and uphill is another logistical challenge. But we're dedicated to do it. We know we can do it. It's just a matter of getting the time to continue to flush out and work through those those opportunities. Like I said, you know, it's very unusual and inefficient for a golf course to use city-treated water for irrigation. But this golf course is really something special. The more that the more people we get out to the golf course, the more wonderful things we hear about it. You know, it's such a gem, and we want to keep that going. We want to bring more people to the golf course. We want to install golf cottages so that people from out of town can stay and they can bring their friends and get more and more interest and more eyeballs and more revenue. We need more time, and getting the golf course off of expensive treated water is not just something good for the golf course, it's good for the community, and something that we're dedicated to do.
I got another follow-up. I appreciate your answer there, and I agree with you on what you just finished with. The other question is, Travis, is this lower rate that they currently have, is that due to the deal that was made with the other owners 6 or 7 years ago? And that substantial jump, the result of that?
So that substantial jump was also shown in the 2017 rate study. It was chosen at that point, and this was a little bit before my time, so this is kind of my understanding of it, to do more of a phased-in approach, which didn't really come to fruition. So they never really got put up into the commercial, which was deemed what they should do at that point, rate. And so it's no surprise. I mean, it was shown in the last rate study, it's shown in this rate study, and just never got implemented. They had requested rate reductions at that time as well, so.
Yeah. I was sitting in on those meetings. It was before you were here, Ryan, even upstairs here, and they didn't follow through with all of the things that were supposed to happen. There were supposed to be 1,500 houses out there by now for that rate. So that's what I was just curious about.
Yeah, so the rate didn't change. What ended up happening is there was an incentive agreement that the city agreed to with the developer, where we discounted or had a rebates where the city offset some of those charges. So the rate was charged, but it was offset through an incentive deal.
But it was that lower, this rate.
It was at this rate, and then there was an incentive on top of this rate.
I don't golf, but I would like to see the golf course be able to stay. What kind of considerations are you folks would meet your needs to keep the golf course viable and open?
Well, I mean,
What percentage of decrease in water rate?
boy, I'm not sure I have an answer for you. So I'm sorry, sir. I don't know I don't know that I can quantify it at this time. We've got other people that are more crunching through the accountants and numbers and what would that minimum value be. All I can say is that, you know, we do understand the water rate reductions and accommodations that have been made with the city and previous owners, and just here to advocate if we can have some more time to further reinforce the operations at the golf course, to continue with marketing efforts and get more people from the region and across the country to the golf course. I mentioned, you know, the golf cottages and a clubhouse. We want to get not having a clubhouse or an opportunity for events to really have a meaningful time out there is a challenge. So it's not just the water, but it's the amenities as well, the clubhouse, and getting some golf course stay and cottages so that people can come from out of town and stay there and continue to play and add revenue. So it's a multi-pronged effort, and I'm sorry I don't have a number for you or a quantity on the rates or percentages.
If I'm not mistaken, you can correct me, but your closest source of non-potable water or irrigation water would be 4 Mile Creek. Is that correct?
Yes, 4 Mile Creek, and then there's Wofford Ditch It pulls off of 4 Mile Creek for irrigating some of the nearby properties. So there's potential there. There's the hydraulic ditch that there might be some potential for access. And then there's also well water. We've been speaking with the city's water attorney to understand, you know, can we install a well, and what does that look like? You know, there's challenges with that. I can't remember the term, but you need to, if you're going to pull water out of the ground, you need to, it starts with an A.
Augmentation.
That's the word. Thank you. Thank you. A gentleman's name is Craig Liss. He's really wonderful to work with. He actually wrote the state regulations on the augmentation plans that are necessary for wells. So he's helping us understand if this is an option, here's what we need to do. There's some challenges with you can't necessarily install a well and then augment that well with ditch water, right? So if you're augmenting, how are you augmenting it, right? So we're working through, we're trying to find any and all opportunities for raw and renewable water we can. We've got some avenues that we've been exploring over the last year, and we're dedicated to making at least one of them happen, but we just need more time.
Well, I don't mean to put a damper on things, but water in this state is at a super premium.
Mm-hmm.
Water in this town is at a super premium. As far as the irrigation water goes, I would say good luck.
I will take that good luck. Thank you, sir.
I'm not the kind of guy that beat around the bush.
No,
So,
I
there you
appreciate
go.
that. We don't need any bush beating around here. We just need the facts and some water and a little bit more time. Thank you.
I have a question from the internet here. For a comment, I guess, in keeping, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
In keeping the rates low, that impacts how the golf course invests their money. You know, a clubhouse might be more appealing to them when they have low water rates. When the rates are higher, putting effort and money into upgrading the water system might take precedence. So, you know, on the backs of what looks like commercial multi-unit and maybe commercial, we're giving the golf course the option to where they spend their money. And that's something to think about.
So I think we can go back to the original question of, you know, should a total cost of service be implemented, or do we want to consider the adjusted cost of service? I know that in the past there also has been phased-in approaches to cost of service or large water rate increases. It's also an option. You can say where we would like to implement the full cost of service, everybody pays their fair share over a certain amount of years, 1, 2, 3. I would not like to see any large amount of time, because the longer you phase in any kind of cost of service, that's revenue that the water department's losing. That's, you know, we've done all this work to prove out that we need it. You know, it's a consideration that we need to talk about.
I'm hearing the basic issue that we're being asked to form some kind of judgment on is whether or not we want to have customers pay their cost for service, what it costs to serve them, or come up with some way of having a subsidy approach to certain customer classes.
I think it's a fair way of putting it.
Is that a fair way of putting it?
Yes.
And then we have to think about why would those customer classes get that special treatment? And then how do you get away from that special treatment going into the future? Is that basically what we're trying to address
I think
here?
that's a good way of putting that.
Travis, is that February, you said 3rd to go to council?
February 5th is going to be a
5th.
general government meeting. Then that's going to be the full council in basically a subcommittee, maybe is a good way to put it. It's not a full council meeting. It's where they will discuss how they want to move forward with a possible ordinance. Go ahead,
I
sorry.
was just gonna say, no action is taken, it's all
Yep.
discussion and direction.
Yep. So then if there is an ordinance that would maybe be presented out of that, it would have to go back to a subcommittee and it would have to be heard at 2 council meetings. So there would be 3 more opportunities to talk about it before any kind of final action would be taken.
My own personal opinion, there's not even half of this board here. I personally would hate to take, because at any other meeting, you need a quorum.
Sure.
We don't have a quorum. So to give you some kind of an answer to go to council with, I don't feel comfortable with it this time, with this few people.
Yeah, I
here.
don't know. We have, yeah, I hear you and agree. I think we do still have 3 members virtually. So I believe Tim Dennehy joined back in, Tim Payne is on, and Andrew is on virtually. I don't know if we can hear them or they can speak in that capacity, but
Yeah, Travis, this
Yeah.
is Tim. It looks to me like, looking at this rate, the multi-unit commercial would, on the adjusted cost of service, would be subsidizing mostly the golf course. Is that about how it looks?
yeah, I would say the golf course and municipal,
In municipal?
yeah, largely. And to a far lesser degree residential.
I don't know, is there a hybrid type of thing you can do where you can kind of split the differences on those?
Yeah, the adjusted cost of service is that a bit. It doesn't raise rates on any of the other customer classes. So if what I'm hearing is maybe a halfway point or something like that, we don't have those numbers readily
Okay.
available, if that's what you're asking for.
Right,
I'm not saying it
Okay.
can't happen, we just don't have those in this meeting.
right. Okay, thanks.
I think the other number that kind of is missing from the table we're looking at are the pump rates for the higher zones. And, because that was a significant, good-sized number. And I don't know, are we, that's just something that doesn't show up in that other table so well.
Yeah, I was kind of trying to separate out those 2 questions so we can talk about proposed pumping rates next. It is worth pointing out that 4 Mile Ranch, the golf course is in that pump zone as well. So if those pumping rates are approved, you can see that the current rate is an additional 57 cents per thousand, and the cost of service would be $1.01. So they would, half a dollar roughly, quick math, would get a raise in rates just from the pumping cost of service if approved. So it's worth putting up or saying it in the context of this discussion. But yeah, I was trying to separate all the policy questions.
But we can't just do the cost of service for the pumping and the adjusted cost of service for everything else. That doesn't add up, right?
Sure. I mean, there's if we do adjust it at some point or we don't do pumping, I mean, those revenues are lost or need to be spread out back to customer classes. So right now it's kind of like its own customer class, pumping and fire lines. if those aren't approved for a rise in rates, then it gets spread out back to customer classes.
So are you looking for some kind of consensus to move forward on this question? Is that what you're looking for?
I was hoping so, yeah, hoping for some sort of general notion about how at least a water committee would like to inform the general government meeting about how the opinions of, our opinions go. They'll, of course, form their own, but they'll take whatever water committee actions or suggestions, a better word for it, they'll listen to those as well.
Okay.
I don't know, I don't have a stake in city water, so I guess I'm kind of a neutral party here, but I guess there's two ways to look at it from my point of view. Is one, I get the golf course wants to try to thrive, and I hope they do. I've hoped that for years. I think all of us have, and there's been some agreements made that haven't came true and have failed, however you want to look at that. So you want to give these guys the benefit of the doubt, I guess, and hopefully that they come up with ideas that to do it. And working on other raw water from other places is a great idea. It's going to be tough, as Doug said. Augmentation is not as tough as finding the water to start with. I think that can be accomplished, but I guess you got to think about, is it worth the gamble again to try to keep those rates lower to give them more opportunity to thrive and grow that business? Do you guys want the city to grow that much? How much revenue is that going to create for the city? They already bring people in from all over the country. I mean, they see this golf course and they come here specifically to play that, so they stay hopefully here, if not close. But if they have the opportunities to stay on the course, it may enhance those quite a bit, which in turn you're going to eventually get paid back for that water, but it's not going to be immediate. Same as their return is not going to be immediate. But then again, it's a gamble like they've taken in the past, and it hasn't come to fruition. So I got to try to look at it that way. I think it's a wonderful opportunity, and I understand where they're coming from as far as water goes. I understand where the city comes from as far as providing the water. It is foolish to put treated water on a golf course. Everybody knows that. Right now, that's the option that they have. But I don't know if I ever said anything other than just rambled, but that's my thoughts.
No, that's fair. I mean, it's not an easy question to answer in an hour. I'll give everybody that's for sure. So, welcome
I
any other
think
comments.
without a golf course in this town, you're not going to see near the revenue or the tax dollars. They're going to go someplace where there's a golf course. And so I think that should have some type of bearing on the thought process here.
I don't disagree with you, Doug, but when you talk to somebody about a pool, without a pool, nobody comes here. Without a rec center, nobody comes here. Without a golf course, nobody comes here. It depends on which type of people you're talking to on that. I don't disagree with you. I love this golf course. I love playing out there. I think the rates go up, the price goes up. I don't go play there as much too. I mean, it's all a big cycle thing, but they thought that when the golf course south of town closed too, So we're still here. I do think it enhances the area, and I'd hate to see it go because it's a beautiful golf course, but I don't know that. Yeah.
Well, one of the pieces of information I don't have is how much of this increase that we're showing here could we actually cause the golf course without causing them too much pain? It sounds to me that this has been an issue going for years and years and years and years, and that's a significant amount of money that is now being paid, subsidized by citizens of Canyon City for the golf course. And there's some value there. There is. I love playing this golf course. But to not raise it at all is problematic from my perspective, because there's been a demonstrated lack of progress on this issue. And so as a minimum, what I would support is some kind of a phasing in of full cost of service over some period of time, so that they get a little bit of time, but it's starting to move in that direction where they're getting to pay for what they're receiving from the water department, and it's a schedule that we hold them to. That's my personal opinion.
I would concur with that. I feel like without that incentive, if they know the price is going up in a few years, that gives them incentive to work on those projects. And I think that's important to give them that incentive. And I also think, we talk about who is this on the backs of, and we look at the rates on, I guess maybe Travis, you could talk about why are the multi-unit commercial rates so high? I mean, that's rentals. That's people, that can't afford to buy a house. So we're kind of putting it on the backs of others that maybe can't afford it as well.
Yeah, we did quite a lot of talking about that, like Todd was talking about. And we did, when we dug into the 2017 water rate study, we found it was in there as well. And it kind of came down to how the phasing in was supposed to be, was kind of lost in all the detail. That in the overall kind of memo that we got from that water rate, it just called out 9% rate increases. And unless you really dug into it, did we find that there was supposed to be more phasing in of different customer class differences. So I think that it was just an issue with implementation of the last water rate study in the end.
I'll propose something just to get the conversation going. Why don't we look at a 3-year time frame, 33% each year, getting to cost of service at the end of 3 years for the golf course?
I would suggest if we're going to do a 3-year time frame, it'd be across all customer classes, not just for one. But that would be my suggestion.
To move them to full cost of service? Okay.
That makes sense to me. It's a big chunk otherwise to do it all at once, and to do the adjusted rate change, to me, is just kind of kicking the can down the road.
Yeah, I agree. I think 3 years or even to 5 years would probably work, but 3 years would be fine.
Todd, do you have anything is it as simple as just kind of breaking those cost increases into, third chunks and doing that year by year?
There's a couple ways we can do this. We could just split the difference with the rates and possibly get the cost service, but I think the best way to do it would be to phase the cost of service numbers and calculate the rates based off of that, rather than just phasing the rates, because we might get some wonky numbers. We can look at both ways, but traditionally when we phased cost service like this before, we look at we phase the cost service and design the rates on those costs that are changing each year, rather than just phasing the rates. But we can look at both ways real quick and find out what would be the best to move forward with.
What do you think the time frame for coming up with those numbers for? I don't want to put you on the spot. So if we could certainly talk about this off, but I'm just curious if that's...
Todd can do it. He's a genius.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. I mean, it'll take a few hours to do that. I mean, if you were wanting to have it for the next week's council meeting, that might be tough, because we want to walk through it and make sure we've taken the correct approach.
Yeah, very understandable.
Yeah, so, but, within 2 weeks, I think we could do that.
Okay.
And that's just make sure we have enough time to go back and forth, make sure you're comfortable with the numbers.
Okay. Anybody else on the committee have anything adverse to say about that question? Is everybody pretty cozy, thumbs up on that, or?
Yeah, I'm good with that. I just want to say that, I was listening the whole time there. And I think the one comment that really I have to say I agree with was with Mr. McFarland's here. As we, in this city, everybody says, again, like he said, we need a golf course, we need a swimming pool. These are all things that all of us, and I also think as we raise these questions, I think we better look at a percentage of how many people use these facilities and really put our priorities into those facilities that have more priorities to them. And, if I was hedging more money, right now within the city limits or that, I would be putting it toward a different thing rather than a golf course. Although the golf course can make very good money, I do think there's other things right now that the city could subsidize or help out a little bit more rather than this. And I think a pool is still number one on our priority of trying to get something in this town that can benefit, I can't say everybody, but a larger percentage of people that will use that facility. Thanks.
You're good with that? Thumbs up? Thumbs up enough? Okay, does that go for, do you want to have further discussion on the fire lines, the pump zones? Does that go across the board? Or do you want to talk about those separately?
Talk about the fire lines just a second. So these are the mandated fire lines that are in commercial buildings?
Yes, largely. I don't know if mandate is the right word, but yeah, for lack of a better word, that's what we'll say. When,
Well, it is if
a
the
use
use
goes into a
changes.
new building, they have to have a fire line.
The use changes, so you
Yeah.
mandate once and then you mandate another fee. I think that's ridiculous, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, it's a fair statement. We're not mandating fire
know.
lines have to go in, but we
But
have to provide the
codes
capacity.
The codes do provide that, and then you're paying for a stationary water line just because it's there and may be used one day. God forbid it ever have to go off, but it's not pumping water, right?
Right, but we
So-
do have to provide the additional storage to be able to serve
Right.
all those fire lines. So
Right.
as we see more fire lines come in, that means we have to have more storage capacity to be able to feed all that. So that's where the reasoning comes in, that they should be paying some amount of money for that infrastructure, that capacity.
Storage, you also have, backflow preventers and other administrative and compliance things that have to be done from a water department standpoint to make sure that all of those things are operating the way they should.
But isn't the backflow preventer put on the occupant of the building that put the water system in because it was a mandate?
It is, but we still have to check and make sure we're in compliance with, state codes as well from the water department standpoint.
Yeah, we have a full-time employee that's a backflow inspector,
Yeah.
and that's commercial and fire lines. That's
I get
not
that.
just fire line.
I just hate mandates, and that is one.
Yeah,
So
it
you're
is.
paying twice for it.
And it's
That's just-
additional cost to business owners.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, we try to
a fair way
make
of putting
a
it.
business thrive, and then we do everything we can to kill it. It's
Sure.
just- Yeah, that's just opinion.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Todd, can you put up that,
Sure.
the amount of money we're talking about? Probably be worth.
It
And
was
we are-
37,000, I'm sorry, I'll go back here. It was
Uh,
$38,000 there,
Yeah, can we put slide 21 up, please?
yeah.
I was just gonna say, this is, a monthly service. We are still not planning on charging for the fire line itself from a tap fee standpoint. Those will continue to remain, no charge.
And I have to keep reminding myself that if these commercial businesses don't pay for this fee, then customers pay for it. The residents pay for it. And yet they are doing business and making money. So that just from a fairness standpoint, that doesn't seem fair to me.
I agree with that. However, you're going to pay for it one way or the other. if I have the business, I'm gonna charge you it through the business, so
That's
it's.
true.
It's 6 to 1, half a dozen of the other on that aspect.
Well, but I get to elect to hire your business as opposed to
True.
it just coming through
That's
on my
true.
rate, so.
Yeah.
I'll just remind you to hit the microphone button if you're talking, please.
I don't like to subsidize people who I don't even know.
Yeah, fair point. Fair points all around.
So to answer your question on that, I can't.
Yeah,
That's-
fair
that's my
enough.
opinion.
Yeah, and that's okay. Does anybody online have any comments?
So the fire line, Trav, that goes from the main into the building, as far as the sprinkler system itself, or, what, I guess, what is the whole component there? Is it from the main all the way into the sprinklers?
Yeah, it's basically like your domestic service line is its own line. It has to be separated from your domestic line that will feed a sprinkler system or any other kind of fire protection measures that are in that building. So it's its own service line, generally much larger
Oh,
than.
I knew that.
Yeah.
Thanks. I knew
Yep,
that.
all good. And we have,
Could I ask a question, Chair?
Sure.
Thank you. Amy Smisher. I'm wondering if it would be possible to, I think it's slide 21, to understand how many of the 85 fall into each class and kind of what that would look like for their increase in commercial charges, just so that we can get a better sense of, are the majority of them looking at just a $1 increase per month, or do we have a lot of folks who are looking at a more substantial increase to their bill?
Travis, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but a standard fire line is typically 4 inches, 4 to 6 inches.
yeah, I mean, the vast majority that we see are 4 inches, especially when it goes in for the building. But we do have quite a few, even 3/4 inch and a half. I mean, there are a lot of smaller ones that exist out there too. But generally what we see is 4 to 6, but we do see 8 to 10 to 12 for hotels, or I think the new tire store had a very large, I think they were an 8-inch fire line, so there is quite the range, but I should be able to get that to you pretty easily.
Thanks. I
Yeah.
think that would be really helpful in understanding what type of increase we're really looking at for the majority of the businesses in town.
Okay, I've heard kind of some for, some against, I guess is the way I'll put it. Anybody else have an opinion or comment?
We talking in general?
Just for the fire lines for right now.
Okay.
Okay, which is okay too.
We're a big help for you, aren't we?
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, these are questions that are gonna come up, so this is a big help, even if we don't get direct direction of how we wanna proceed. So,
I have one comment.
yes, please.
So we're also, as we're talking about this 3-year phase-in of cost of service, some of those commercial rates will go down. Is that correct? If we actually move towards cost of service?
That is correct.
So these fire line costs will be kind of swallowed up, or they will be kind of offset a little bit by some rate changes for them. So it'll be a bump at first, but it'll diminish over time.
Yeah, that's probably a fair way of putting it. I don't know what the cost offsets would be, but certainly with multifamily hotels, things of that nature, having a quite large rate reduction, there would be offset. I think commercial was less of a rate reduction, but still a reduction, if I remember right.
Well, in that case, I'm okay with doing it this way as long as we're going the other direction of cost of service. That's how I feel about it.
I didn't catch it, I'm sorry.
I think we should be paying, I think as long as we're moving towards cost of service, even if it's phased in, that I'm okay with private fire lines, because you know, that is a cost, and it will be offset somewhat as they see their rates come down a little bit.
Understood.
It was kind of hidden in their commercial rates before, and this is just a line, will eventually be a line item that certain businesses that have those will have to pay for.
Yeah, and I think the maybe even better way of putting that is everybody was paying for this before. All customer classes were paying for this infrastructure, this capacity need,
Yeah.
and now it would be its own rate class.
I think ultimately going towards cost of service is the right thing to do.
Okay,
Is that across the board?
it can be.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't got quite to the other policy, but it certainly can be. I mean, if that's the overall direction, that's not a bad thing, that we would like to see a phased-in approach to overall full cost of service, everybody paying their fair share by X number of years. What I've heard is 3.
To me, it only seems we need to do it across the board, not each individual category.
Okay.
I'd agree with that.
Okay. I saw some head nods and one agree. Yep, more head nods, a thumbs up.
Yeah, works for me.
That certainly simplifies what I got to write in my next memo, so I appreciate that. Okay. Any other comments, concerns, questions?
Have you got out of us what you need?
I believe so.
Good.
Yeah.
Glad to hear it.
Can I throw one more curveball?
Sure.
If we're looking at 3 years, should we also look at 5 years just to see what the numbers look like?
We certainly can. Like I said before, the further we push it out, the less revenue that the water department will be getting. So that would be less money for capital projects that we have identified in the rate study and the master plan. So I'm not saying they can't be absorbed or anything like that, but it is a reduction in revenue the further out that we push any kind of adoption of the rate study.
Well, except that the commercial rates will stay high and they will kind of come down over 5 years, right? Or 3 years. So as some go up, others will come down. It's not just the golf course getting a break. It's looking at it for everybody. Is that?
Yeah, I guess if we go across the board, your point is completely fair. If we go across the board, that overall rates won't change. Thank you for the correction. So yes, we can look at 3 years, 5 years.
I think if you just keep it at 3 and just get it done, that way, we get it in.
Okay.
Get the,
I think Todd would thank you for that if you, the less options he has to work on. Okay, I'm getting a lot of head nods, so I think that's the way we'll proceed. Any other comments from anybody back here?
I can make one comment.
Okay.
Rick Harmon, Economic Development. I agree that we need to cover our costs. In terms of the golf course, there were agreements that were broken, but the biggest thing that was not honored is that the existing owners at the time did not market and they did not develop. The whole idea behind the golf course needing raw water is real. But I know if we start to limit their ability to develop by increasing their rates over 3 years, it takes a very long time to develop. Development is very difficult in this community. It's very hard to attract contractors, very hard to attract developers. So 3 years to me is pretty scary to think that they could develop that property, solve the raw water issue, and generate enough people and additional revenue to support that kind of an increase. That's just from me from an economic development perspective. We did have another developer in town looking at the golf course and had a community stakeholder meeting to determine whether the golf course was desired in this community, because he had a different interest for that development. He got significant pushback, and he decided not to do anything. And then Byron's group purchased the property, but my thinking is if we bring in and if we attract a new buyer, which we did, and we don't give them the opportunity to follow through with what they've promised and what we looked for in that original incentive agreement 6 years ago or whatever the case may be, then we're not giving them a fair shake, and they're being held to the standard of a previous owner, which is tough to do to people who have put in millions of dollars into development and are planning millions more. So I don't necessarily want to consider them to be a special group, but the reality is of it, it's going to be very difficult in 3 years to develop the kind of population they need there if those rates are going to go up. The other side of the coin is multifamily housing is a big need in our community, as housing is in general. And higher rates for multifamily housing will disincentivize multifamily housing, which is also very difficult to get developed here. So from my perspective, a bigger picture perspective, yeah, I agree. Everybody needs to pay their fair share, but I think the city needs to determine where its priorities are in terms of growth and development and how best to incentivize it. Cash incentives are extremely difficult to come up with. Everybody's asking for them. And this could be a way to help them, give them a little breathing room anyway to accomplish what they want to accomplish. They are beginning to market commercial properties, which is good, and those are the first that'll be the most revenue generating potential for them. But, we know simply because it's so hard to find development here. We are a couple of years behind the Front Range. The Front Range is struggling right now with development other than multifamily in Colorado Springs. They're overbuilt, which will also make it more difficult for us to get multifamily here. So it's a tangled web that economic development lives in. And my caution, and I understand there's not going to be a decision made here, it's going to be a recommendation. My caution is to carefully go down the road of increasing rates on 4 Mile in particular. But, unfortunately, everything is difficult right now to develop and attract in our world. So it's a weird time economically right now. We're growing, but to the extent that they could support an increase over the next 3 years, I don't think that would work, because it takes a long time to develop. So my comments, willing to take some questions, but really more food for thought than anything.
I agree that it's a policy issue for the city to decide whether they want to
absolutely
subsidize certain developments for the good of the community. But if you're going to use the water rates to do that, then I also think the residential customers need to be alerted to the fact that their rates are higher because you are subsidizing, for say, the golf course, as opposed to just burying it in the rates. So,
yeah, I'm not arguing with that. I agree. And most residential people here, I think, honestly believe they're already subsidizing it. But you're right. I agree with you on that.
So, but it is a policy call for the city council on what do they want to do, where do they want to put their incentives, and how they do it. I just want to make sure that if it's going to be in this rate structure for the water department, that the customers that are subsidizing it recognize that that was the decision.
Understood. And I can agree with that. Yeah. Transparency is a lot better than none. So I agree. All right.
Great. Okay, with that, I think we can go ahead and adjourn. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.